Okay, first up this week is going to be The Last Light, book number 5 in the Wandering Inn series, written by Pirate Ama. It is 1,791 pages. It is $3.99. It is not, however, available on Kindle Unlimited, but it's also available free on the internet. If you go to wanderinginn.com, you can read all the chapters for free. So this is just a nice way to support an author whose stuff you enjoy. And here's the author's description. Kings awake and emperors build new lands, changes coming to the world. From the king of destruction moving to a certain doctor finding more friends from home. The Wandering Inn has a princess who solves problems rather than creates them, and her name is Lyonette. Yet, what happens when the innkeeper returns to manage her inn? Lyonette must learn to be a good employee rather than manage everything herself, and sharing power is never easy. Nor is it ever simple in war, but that is where Geneva Scala remains, in bloodier and increasingly brutal battles. The Last Light of Baleros is now growing in fame, but there is no future there. She is desperate and working against hostile forces who see her interventions as dangerous and still bears the wounds of her previous war to save lives, but she is no longer alone. Okay, this is a collected serial story. The author has a Patreon page. They put out the most recently written chapters there. Then they go to thewanderinginn.com where you can read it for free. And this series is like super long. Like this is like what the 5th book in this series, but it's only the 4th volume according to like what's online out of 8. So this is like a super duper long series. And then it is a serial story. And the nature of a serial story is that the author posts chapters on a regular basis. And they're just kind of collected for the novel version. And what that means is that the story isn't always a novel-sized plot with like a 3 or 4 act structure. Instead, sometimes there are some side stories, and then it moves around to different side stories and different side characters. And that's a lot of what the first part of this novel is. When this story focused on the characters that I loved, the characters from the first book, Erin, Ryoka, even the Nantinium, or any of the original characters from the first book, or in that area, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was really good, and what is on its own is great. However, a good portion of the novel does shift to these, I don't want to say like side stories or just like short stories for other characters that are sometimes interwoven into the main storyline, or just on their own, and the author wants to write stories about different people of different continents in this kind of RPG universe. And they're not bad at all. They're entertaining in their own rights. They're just not as good for me because they're characters I don't really care about. So like if they die or if they live or they succeed or they don't, I don't care as much. Like there are some side characters like the doctor that I really enjoyed, and seeing her group expanding is really nice and interesting, but the stories I really loved always are going to revolve around that main character series, around the Wandering Inn, which is the title of the series in the book. So any of those characters, and once this novel got back to them, I was like, oh, this is great. And you'll see that reflected in a lot of the reviews, and that a lot of people are like, oh, some of the side characters just ruined it for me. I couldn't continue on. And I encourage you, if that's the case for you, if you find yourself not really interested in the beginning of it, because it is about side characters and there's little stories, skip past them. It's a serial story. Like it really is. Like you can absolutely skip past them, and you're not really going to lose out on much, and just get to the characters that you really love. And I think you'll enjoy a lot more. Or you can just read through it and know that these characters are probably going to be interwoven into the main series at some point in the future. But again, this is kind of what you're going to get with a collected serial collection. And you either like it or not. For me, I took a couple points, like 9 points, like full decimal points off of the story. Just because, again, my enjoyment was lessened a little bit, like a lot of people, for these other side characters. However, I'm sure somebody out there who's reading this, like, I love those side characters so much, they were better than the original or something. Like, absolutely great. Make sure you leave that comment in the review for this book, because the authors, that's one of the ways you can support an author you like. Leave a nice review, buy the book. There we go. So for me, still a really good book. But again, it is a serial collection, but I recognize that going in. So it's still a very entertaining story for me. But for me, the older characters are the ones that I love the most. So it gets a score of 7.8 out of 10. Still a really good review score for The Last Light, book number 5, The Wandering Inn.